I think that the Republican Party now is organized by everybody bending their knee to a leader. I think the biggest mistake we made as a party in 2024 is we didn't let the people choose the candidate. I think the most important job of governors around the country is to oversee our education system. That's something I'm really proud of. Now, with that pride comes a tremendous responsibility.
As a proud Puerto Rican, I invite you to my house for a 6 p.m. function. You show up at 6 p.m. on the dot.
Oh, that's bad. You sing a Bad Bunny?
You don't know who Bad Bunny is?
Yeah, I know Bad Bunny.
People say that Delaware doesn't have famous people.
A state our size elected a president and at the same time had the star of Parks and Rec. Who would want to be in any other state?
Hey everyone, real quick, do me a favor. Check and see if you're subscribed to our channel. Over 75% of you who enjoy our content aren't yet subscribed, and the best way to support us for free is subscribing and turning on that post notifications bell so you never miss an episode. Once you're done with that, in the comments, let us know who you want us to talk to next. Your feedback is super important and helps us make sure we can deliver the best quality content here at the Green Room. That's it. Thank you so much once again, and let's jump right into today's episode. Today, we've got our biggest guest yet. He's a world traveler, going from everywhere from Wilmington to Providence to what he thought was Mount Kilimanjaro to Iraq, then to New York before he decided there's just no place like home. He defied expectations by defeating a 12-year incumbent for county executive. He helped establish a state-of-the-art center for those experiencing homelessness, and now he's on a mission to transform his state's education system one teacher salary at a time. Give it up for the man with plans to bring legal Mary Jane to a corner store near you, the 76th governor of Delaware, Matt Meyer.
There we go. Welcome to the
Thank you.
podcast,
There it is.
man.
Legal Mary Jane. Wow.
But just so you
Thank
know,
you.
a little inside baseball, he was like, I need to say that. We were like, do you need to say it? He was like, I need to say that.
Because I heard you say green elephant the other day.
The green elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I did. There was some other lines that I didn't use in my state of the state that related to elephant.
You had just a list of them that you wanted to.
There were a number of
hit
things, mostly references to some of the people viewing Doping Up before they saw my speech. That was sort of the reference.
Yeah,
We decided not to go there.
I think that makes sense. Well, we know you have a busy schedule. We want to get right into it. So, former President Joe Biden was just at your Passover Seder.
Mhm.
And you, 37 years ago, volunteered for his first presidential campaign.
I think it was more like 7
1988.
years ago and 37
We want to
years ago.
ask, as the Democratic governor of Delaware, how have you seen the party change over the last 37 years?
I was not then, and I don't think I've ever been like a Democratic Party insider who feels like he knows what is going on the inside. It's strange. I even feel that way now. And if you see what's going on in Dover, our state capital, there's a lot of evidence that I'm not the insider. I feel like that parties often have sort of an inside, any group has sort of an inside group that's trying to set the agenda. What's good right now about the Democratic Party, and I think it's mostly always been true, at least in my lifetime. I like to think it's been true, maybe less so then. Today in the Republican Party, there's really 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 people, I feel like, setting the whole agenda for the party. The Republican Party traditionally is very anti any increase in tax. They're very pro free, no tariff trade. And suddenly they've gone in a completely different direction for no other reason than the guy leading them has said, this is what we're doing. And so they say, it's almost like a kingdom. I've never felt like the Democratic Party is like that. I think the Democratic Party, when I was growing up, was just coming out of sort of the smoky room phase. But there was a sense that people would a few leaders would go into a room that was small. They'd all have their cigars or cigarettes they'd smoke up, and they'd decide the future of the party. And that's the way the future of the party was decided. I think there's definitely a sense now that doesn't really matter. That what matters is what are the thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of Americans want. And I like to think the Democratic Party, what we do, it was described to me recently that if there's a food program, like what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat right now? It's just Trump, right? And somebody else said to me, no, that's not it. What's the difference between a Republican and Democrat now, and has always been the difference between a Republican and Democrat, is if you have a program to give food to people that need it, and you give it to 1,000 people, and there's one person who misuses it, one person who gets in who doesn't need the food, or one person who takes the food and resells the food, the Republican will say, that's a terrible program. We need to get rid of it. It's wasting public money. A Democrat will look at that program and say, if there's one person who desperately needs food and we're feeding that one person, that's a program that needs to continue. So I think that's sort of the core of what the Democratic Party is. That's the core of why I got into this business. And it's the core why I continue to wake up in the morning, look myself in the mirror and say, I'm a Democrat.
I would say, I feel like there's a general consensus, at least from the people that I've talked to, that the Republican Party, at least in the 24 election, was able to coalesce around one candidate. And I think looking forward to 28, there's not a general consensus, I think, for either party about who they really want to push as their nominee. Do you think, are you someone that wants to take that next step? Are you involved in those discussions about who's going to be the face?
Here's what I really think. And I'm like, almost every interview I do now, certainly any interview outside of Delaware I do, people are asking me, who's that leader? I think that the Republican Party now is organized by everybody bending their knee to a leader. I think the Democratic Party and the future leader of the party is determined by the people. I think the biggest mistake we made as a party in 2024 is we didn't let the people choose the candidate. And in fact, if you go back the last few election cycles, even going back to when Hillary and Obama were facing each other, there are people trying to tilt the playing field within the Democratic Party. We need to stop that. We need to have a sort of fair playing field and let anybody interested in running put themselves out there, and we'll see. There's a lot of focus now being put. I don't know how much attention you guys are paying, but Bernie Sanders and AOC are going across the country, and they're drawing huge crowds. And everyone's looking at Bernie and AOC and saying AOC is the future, maybe Bernie too. And I said, forget about Bernie and AOC. Let's talk about the crowds, right? And what do those crowds want? I think someone showing up at a AOC function might indicate that she's a leader. Listen, I think I'm in a very interesting position now as a Democratic Party governor. Right now, we are the 22, 23 states controlled by Democratic governors. We are the future of this country, I believe, a future that doesn't take a chainsaw to government, a future that says, how do we take your tax dollar and use it most efficiently and return amazing education system? Because let's be honest, I was a teacher. I'm one of, I think, 3 teachers who are governors right now in America. Our education system, our public education system is not acceptable in this country right now. It sucks. And whatever party, whatever state, whatever governor is able to deliver an education system that truly develops the workforce of tomorrow, that truly develops the sort of civic backbone of tomorrow, I think that's who our leader is.
We are planning on getting to education. I really want to ask you about that. But before we move on from what we were just talking about, there's a podcaster, a comedian named Andrew Schultz, and he coined this term dunk culture, which is, he was talking to Mayor Adams from New York City. It feels like in politics, as a young person, I'm just looking at what's going on. It seems more of a system of we're scoring points against each other, and it's not like we're working together to fix things as public servants. And I know Delaware, we haven't had a Republican governor since '93, I believe.
It's been a long time.
And I feel like maybe, do you have a message to try and bridge that gap so it doesn't feel like it's a point scoring system? Because it really does, from my perspective, feel like these two are just fighting, and there's not, like, we need to bridge the gap, especially, in Delaware, for those who maybe don't feel heard. Yeah. Do you see that in Delaware? Do you see that in this country?
I guess I'm on the podcast and I got my ticket by winning a governor's election. Before that, I was a county executive, as you know, Andres. Most people don't know what a county executive is. I was a school teacher 8 years ago, got elected county executive, and I joke after I won, and this really happened, there was a group of people that really supported me, that contributed money, that knocked on doors for me, and they brought me, it was a women's business association, and they brought me into a room with like 25 people, some of my strongest supporters after I won. And I walk in the room and they give me a standing ovation. And then I give a little talk to them. And at the end, I'm like, do you guys have any questions? And one of the people is like, what is a county executive? Right? And everybody's like, yeah, what do you actually do? Right? And what a county executive did, one of my most important responsibilities was making sure our sewers worked. I had to make sure literally, I had to make sure people's toilets flushed, right? I learned, and this is at a time, the same day I was elected county executive, President Trump was elected to his first term. And the country was split apart like I'd never seen in my life. But I learned pretty quickly, there might be a MAGA supporter out there, and if there's sewage leaking into his basement, and I can stop that, that MAGA supporter is going to be a Matt Meyer supporter. And there might be someone who completely couldn't stand Donald Trump. And if their toilet didn't flush and it was Matt Meyer's fault, that person was never supporting me. So I feel like my education is in that very, very basic, small d democratic government where you got to respond to constituents. And actually, that's most of what elected officials around the country are doing. You turn on the TV and you think it's just tit for tat, everything. Most of what I do in my life in my professional life is I'm trying to deliver for Delawareans in very basic ways. We, in our recent budget, it didn't get much news coverage, but we increased dramatically paramedic funding in our state to make sure paramedics can respond quicker and with the latest, greatest technology to save people's lives. That's not a Republican Delawarean they're going to, or a Democratic Delawarean to save their life. It's basic service and basic efficient government service. So Andres, I hear what you're saying. When you turn on the TV, when you read the news, I get as discouraged as everyone. This country was created as this incredible dream. Like, it's hard to imagine changing the whole system of government in the face of English monarchy and oppression, people's lives being threatened. And it was based on this dream that government can really work for the people. And it's not a democratic system or a Republican system. It's all of us working together to make a republic that works.
You said education in the U.S. sucks. I think, you can get into the stats, but it's more just a general feeling. I think parents want to have more of a say in their child's education, but then we also look at things like test scores, and test scores are down, and we still spend so much money in education. There's a big divide, I would say. You've been telling me quite a bit. I mean, you're from here, public versus private education in Delaware. But I would say you come to a house, you sit down with a family, they say, we don't know what our child's learning, X, Y, Z. They're not meeting the standards, but we also don't know whether college is the right information, is the right path for them. How do you take such a broad issue and apply it to your state? How do you make sure everyone feels heard in something that is so important like education?
Yeah, so it starts with a strategy where you can't have tactics without first having a strategy. And strategy is about diagnosing the problem. Some people in Delaware and across the country think the biggest problem in education is safety. It's just kids can't go to school in physical, emotional, psychologically safe places. If you define the problem as safety, then you're going to come up with a series of tactics that make things safe. Other people think it's that there's a disconnect between what society needs from our education system and what our school system is providing. Our school system, the base curriculum was designed in the 19th century in many of these schools. And they're sort of problem solving. If you want a school system that's going to design kids to be Google engineers, Amazon engineers, or build the next AI company of tomorrow, like what in Delaware public schools is actually training them to do that, right? So what do we train? There's also huge problems of violence in communities. So shouldn't we be teaching conflict resolution? So it starts by saying, what are we trying to achieve? I believe every 5-year-old in our state should enter school prepared to learn. Every 5-year-old in our state should enter school prepared to learn.
Meaning what?
That seems pretty basic to do. It means that they're exposed to 1 million words before kindergarten. 90% of a child's brain is developed by the time they're 5, by the time they enter kindergarten. I believe a lot of the problems with our test scores in our country and in our community here is based on our early learning. Why are we spending all our money on 5 to 18? There's like a right that's ingrained in us that when you turn 5 until you're 18, you have a right to a free public education. Some people choose not to, right, to go to private school, but you have a right. If I were to stand up and take away that right, it would be seen as insane. But when you stand up and say, okay, we need free public education for 3 and 4-year-olds, for 2-year-olds, people are like, what are you, crazy? And I'm now a parent with a 14-month-old, and it's expensive. It's like it's really pricey, the cost of, I mean, we're like, oh, we can have another kid or we can buy a house, right? When we look at the early education costs for the first 5 years and to do it right. So it starts for me with early education, making sure we're giving exposure to kids. And to be honest, a lot of kids in our community get that from home. A lot of kids don't. And so really it's about the public providing for those kids that may not be getting it at home. And so it starts there. Then it goes into and making sure that you're carrying the torch. Number one, when kids come in at the age of 5 and they have not been exposed to those million words, they're behind. You diagnose that very early, and you're able to put them in a path, just like a doctor puts kids in a path. There's also incredible opportunities with individualized education. So when you go to a doctor, when I went to a doctor when I was your age, they'd ask family history, right? And based on my family history, your grandmother had a stroke. We're going to put you into a screening system so that we identify early the symptoms that may lead to a stroke. Now they can actually run tests, so they don't even need to ask you your family history. They have your DNA. They can see specifically what you're at risk of. Similarly with school, they can say, okay, you're of a certain learning type. We can take a path that's different than everyone else. So when, I taught 6th and 7th grade math, and I can't tell you the number of students who I had who maybe were at the 4th grade level in reading and at the 8th grade level in math, or vice versa. And we really didn't have a system within our education system to provide that person educationally appropriate material at the right time that responds to the way in which they learn. I think we have the opportunity to do that today using technology, but we're not doing it.
I am so excited with everything you just said. I've been working with a filmmaker named Spencer Taylor, who released a documentary called The Death of Recess, which explores what's been happening in our education system and the kind of the death of creativity, also the actual death of recess. We have this stat here, but recess time has been plummeting since, I don't know if it was the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
And what you touched on about the education system being created in the early 1900s, it was created, this is in the documentary, to produce obedient factory workers and not to entice creativity in any way. And the problem is everything else, cameras, all of this has changed. The education system, for some reason, is still sitting in rows and learning and being forced to learn a specific way. So what you said about individualized learning, I would love to know what that would look like. In the documentary, they highlight a school called Alpha School, which uses AI. AI, it's
A1. The Secretary of Education?
Yeah.
She calls it A1, the U.S. Secretary of
Right,
Education.
to specialize education to the student so that, the kid who's excelling in math, but not as much in reading, there's kind of like knobs and levels that you have to change there. The evidence is so overwhelmingly clear that is so much better for a kid's brain to not just be forced to fit in this box. Is there any way you think that could really happen, even in our public schools in Delaware, to create that that's a complete fundamental shift of the education
it's
system?
the second question I ask kids, what's your name? What grade are you in? Right? What does that mean? What grade are you in? I guess I'm really trying to find out how old are you? Listen, I was a kid who, when I was 6 years old, I was doing 3rd grade math, but I was really struggling in reading, right? And so for much of my elementary school career, I felt the reading was really, really hard and almost maybe too advanced for what I needed. And the math was way too easy. I wasn't learning anything, right? And so now using technology, we have systems to deliver that. And it's just a matter of piling it in the right places. There are some schools and classrooms, as you know, around the country who are doing that. And it's not just a math reading thing. To be clear, as you referenced, how many kids in our schools in Delaware, how many kids in schools around our country have amazing art and music talent and other talent? Maybe they weren't, wired to be an author, right? To write, 50-page papers. But we got to make sure that there's an avenue for them to get the sort of education and the basics to enable them to survive and have confidence while explore their pathway. Delaware has an amazing program. It's had it for years that we're really interested in enhancing and improving on. It's called the Pathways Program. We're in high school and in some cases in middle school, kids choose a pathway. And the pathway is a pathway to a career. And it can be a more artistic career. It can be a more industrial career. It can be a career that requires, another 10 years of schooling after high school, a medical career or a legal career or a PhD type career. And I think that Pathways program is a great model for saying, listen, you need a pathway and maybe a backup. We don't really care. We're indifferent to what that pathway is. And in each pathway, we're providing you the skills that you need to know to succeed.
Before we move on from education, I want to touch on this. I think Delaware ranks 45th or 46th in terms of education. And a lot of that is based
on testing scores.
Right. This is what I want to ask you. I go to Northwestern. He obviously does as well. And it's a quote unquote elite institution. I did not get in with test scores. I was blessed by COVID in some way to get in, but I have at Northwestern excelled. And it seems to me that test scores shouldn't be the metric we're using, at least for everybody, because I have done just fine at Northwestern, and I have plenty of friends who got in the same year I did, not applying test scores, and I don't really think it affected academic output. Do you think maybe we have to change how we even judge what a successful education looks like?
We need some metric. We need some tool of assessment. I, as a teacher, felt like testing was like the standardized testing was a terrible form of assessment. I actually took a class when I was in teacher school on assessment. The best assessments not only evaluate your performance, but they also provide the educator and the student with tools to address the shortcomings and enhance the strengths. And I feel like most assessment these days aren't really doing that. There are people who are just bad test takers. There's data that shows it. People who are and have been extraordinarily successful Americans, right, who've gone through and just been horrendous at testing. I remember I had a kid, I don't know if he's still out there, Rand Hudson in elementary school. Whenever we had standardized tests, he would take the bubbles and he'd like draw pictures with it. He would be done. Like we'd have a 2-hour standardized test. In 7 minutes, he'd be like, all done. And he passed it in. And I'm always like, Rand, what are you doing? He's like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, Rand, you're going to like fail. You're going to repeat 4th grade. He's like, whatever. It doesn't matter. And Rand always did fine. He was in all these like special core classes. And I don't think he was special. I don't know how he's doing now, but he was actually a really smart kid.
On Randy,
like almost
Yeah,
like
we need to
outsmarted
check
it. He was like a philosopher in 4th grade. It's like,
Wow.
We don't need this stuff. I think there's got to be a metric. There's got to be a way for us system-wide to say this school is working or not working. I don't think test scores are the end-all, be-all. I think there are some creative assessments out there. I think the best assessment is a portfolio-based assessment where you, in the course of a marketing period, a semester, a year, put together a portfolio of your work. And a teacher, or traditionally, if you go back to the 19th century, you have a community of elders or leaders or adults who assess that portfolio and say, here's where you're doing well and here's where you need to do work. That's very hard to scale up. That's very hard to do in a system in Delaware. We have something like 135,000 students. But things like that, as governor, I'm certainly open to experimenting and piloting programs like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do in a nation of 350 million. I feel like you need some form of standardization. And I don't know that testing is the right way to do that, but I don't know that there's another easier way. And I think
I mean, what does it really matter if there's no standardization? You know who makes it a nightmare for is Northwestern admissions officers.
For sure.
Who
For
I
sure.
was reading some stuff recently, very interesting, and you guys may already know this, but it probably was 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big backlash against standardized testing. Maybe it was more like 10 years ago, where a number of elite schools, I don't know if Northwestern did it, they said standardized testing is no longer a requirement. If you don't take the SAT, you don't take the ACT, you can still get in here. And what they found years later is that actually standardized testing, which they thought were very biased, actually they were biased, but they had less bias than when you take away testing. How else are you going to judge it except your biases? Your biases about what schools are good and bad, what the quality of classes people are taking, et cetera, et cetera.
I know we are tight on time, so this is going to be quite the switch.
Yeah.
But we like to do on our show, we like to kind of focus on more important, serious things, and we like to end every show with just lighthearted, fun conversation. So we are going to switch here. We're going to do a segment, if that's okay. This segment is actually brought to us by Vamanos Tours. Funny enough, our governor works for Vamanos Tours.
I was a volunteer. Yeah, I
as
guess
a tour guide.
I was paid with the trip.
And so Vamanos, as you know, is obviously all about cultural immersion, right?
It's amazing. I know, jokes aside.
Yeah.
I know you might know the owner. It's amazing. Like if you have kids who want to learn culture, I know they started in Puerto Rico. They have how many countries? Yeah, 12 countries or something. They send people to. It's an extraordinary way to be exposed to a culture.
Yeah, the mission is kind of to go beyond the quote unquote tourist traps and show the authentic and real part of the country. So we've also talked to your colleagues. We've heard you're somewhat of a Duolingo master.
Keyboard warrior.
Yes.
So to speak.
1255 días consecutivo.
You might be the only governor in history to have that long of a streak going on in Spanish Duolingo.
Well, I don't do Spanish every day. I do some Hebrew. I do some Arabic. We went to Italy. My wife and I went to Italy last year. So for a month before I set it to Italian. But don't ask me the Italian. I don't know.
No, we'll stick to Spanish.
Yeah, but mostly Spanish.
Okay, so the game is called ¿Qué significa? And it's a Puerto Rico specific quiz that goes beyond what Duolingo would cover. All right, question one. It's 4 questions. It's not too bad. As a proud Puerto Rican, I invite you to my house for a 6 p.m. function. You show up at 6 p.m. on the dot.
Oh, that's bad.
Let me give you some options. Is this disrespectful, completely normal, very kind, or a federal offense?
I think it might be a federal. Under this president, I think it's a federal offense. 6 p.m. What you do in Puerto Rico, actually in Duolingo, I learned this. You take the 6 when they say 6 p.m. You flip it and you show up at 9.
And then add 30 minutes.
And then at 9:30.
Spot on.
Huh?
9:30.
Okay, good.
I'm Argentinian, not Puerto Rican, but I'll be honorary for this question, right? You are chaval. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Chaval.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
When you look up at your 401k after Trump enacts his tariffs, as reference to one of your
You
posts.
guys know what a 401k? I'm impressed.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So they build one Wawa in between 2 Wawas, just in case you can't get to one of the other Wawas. So now you have 3 Wawas.
It's the second option.
Or C is Levi has a diaper malfunction while he's sitting on your lap at a Blue Rocks game.
Let's see. Yeah.
Spot on.
He's
Yeah.
got it.
All right.
Yeah.
Question 3.
Only at a brew, but you're not Chaval if it's at like a Phillies game or a.
No, it's
No,
just got to be
only
a
it
it had to be
has
a
to
Blue
be the
Rocks
Blue
game.
Rocks.
Yeah.
You get a medalla when you sing an entire Bad Bunny song word for word. You disembark from your Velo flight.
Bunny?
Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny.
You know
Bad
who Bad
Bunny.
Bunny is?
Yeah, I know Bad Bunny.
You don't know who Bad Bunny is?
Yeah. No good. Okay. Yeah, it's not A.
Yeah,
Keep
no,
going.
you're you disembark from your Velo flight XP582, or you
Nice.
don't make the podium at the 2022 Bear Triathlon, which, by the way, our governor received a time of 1 hour, 54 minutes, and 17 seconds. Which one would be the correct answer?
Oh man, you're torturing me. You found that time? That's not a real time.
It's a real
It's
time.
a very real time.
Found your wife's time as well.
Yeah.
She beat me.
She did by 3 minutes.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. Yeah, let's see.
Your T1 was a little long. 4.5
It's not C.
It's
It's
not C.
actually B.
What was the word?
Medalla.
This is not on Duo. Never taught me this.
Exactly.
This is not.
That's why we're
How
here
do my
to go
people
deeper.
let you in here to ask these questions?
All right, the last one.
Wait, what
for-
does Madaya mean?
It's the Puerto Rican national beer.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, the last one for this one is what do you say in Spanish? Has to be in Spanish. When your political opponent tells you Delaware is just a highway with tax breaks.
Only rules you have to answer in Spanish.
Has to be in Spanish.
Hey man, Delaware is just a place to drive
trying to
through
think what
and
I
it's
can
got
say
tax
clean.
breaks.
Clean, sin palabras malas. Solo palabras limpias. Hay los Blue Rocks aquí.
That's
A los
what you
Blue
would
Rocks.
say.
No es impuestos.
That's how you would shut him down?
No es impuestos solamente. In Espanol, I don't know the language that well. What else do you want me to say?
Bro, you have 1,200 days on Duolingo, bro. You got this, dude. They don't do the insult section on Duolingo.
I don't have 1,200 days. I have 1,255 días.
My bad.
Very
You're right.
different.
Yeah,
Two
you're right.
completely
You're right.
different. things.
What's the answer?
This was an
There was
open-ended
no
one.
answer.
We just
It's
wanted to know
open-ended.
if this ever happens, what are you responding with? Apparently, you're just going to tell them, go to a Blue Rocks game. Is that what it is?
Are they good?
That's right. Go to the Blue Rocks.
Yeah, go to the
They
Blue-
won a game. They were 0-5.
They won a game.
I threw out the first pitch, at their first home game, and they won.
Did you make it to home plate?
The ball still, to this day, that was like a week ago, the ball to this day has still not touched the ground. It's incredible.
That's incredible.
Straight
It's
into
not
the
just
stands?
incredible that I threw it, but that meant that Rocky Bluewinkle, who's the mascot,
Oh my god!
Rocky caught the ball. It didn't. This is a true
Strike.
story. You can go back and look at the
0-1.
video. You apparently reviewed my triathlon time. I'm sure you can find the video of my first pitch.
Okay, we got to keep going on because of time, but we want to do just a Delaware specific question, a bunch of Delaware questions for the people, for the
rapid
culture.
fire.
Qual idioma?
And this one's in English.
Oh,
Back to
okay.
English.
Imagine we, no.
Yeah.
All right, really quick. What's your fascination with Converse shoes and why? What's the
Okay,
deal
so
with
this
that?
is Cool Generation. I don't know if I'm allowed to I
Yeah.
know Vamonos Stores
No,
sponsor this.
no, go ahead.
Go
Cool
for it.
Generation with a K. Cool Generation is a Delaware company. It's a guy, Randall Law, who just believes that instead of kids going around spending $200 buying a pair of sneakers, they should design them and make them and sell them.
Oh, wow.
And so he's developed a program for young people where they design sneakers and he makes them. He's a Delaware guy. And
You
so I
got
do
Puerto
what I
Rico
can
on
to
there
support
too.
him.
Shout out.
I'm
Okay.
not a pizza guy, but the way Grotto's does their pizza is particularly out there for me with the spirals and
Oh,
the
yeah?
cheese. What is up with that?
What's
And
your opinion on
are you a
Grotto's?
fan?
Grottos. I'm a Grottos fan. In
You
fact,
are a fan.
It proves that we're not just a highway with low taxes. I don't know how to say that in Spanish though.
Grotto's has the spiral.
Grottos has
Well, they
the
have
spiral.
they do cheese and sauce and cheese
Yeah,
and sauce.
Grottos, for those watching around the world, is the finest pizza you
Oh.
will find.
Okay.
Better than Chicago deep dish.
I would agree with that actually.
Really?
I'm not a fan at all. of
You're not a
deep
fan of
dish. No,
deep
no.
dish?
I'm not either.
We got to ask you. Do you know what the University of Delaware ginger run is?
I am familiar with it.
You're familiar with this?
Yeah. I am.
Okay. This is I didn't know that. I was informed by my friends that this is a big deal. It's a massive deal. Essentially, for those who don't know, a bunch of red-haired people line up on one side of a street and sprint to the other side, and it's like the biggest event. During
Yeah, I
St.
heard
Patty's.
about it a few months ago, and then somebody showed me the video, and it is. There are a lot of people.
How do you
There you go.
feel about the ginger run?
How do I
Yeah.
feel about I think we need to treat all hair types fairly. I think it would be appropriate if we did a rubio, a blonde hair run,
A blind
and a
hair run?
dark hair run. Why not let everybody run in their own groups?
All right. I mean, there's so
We
many
got a lot.
here. We gotta. All right. What is a slippery dumpling? And are you a fan?
Well, okay, hold on. Let's give some context.
No.
If
Slippery.
you look up on
If it's-
Google, what is the most Delaware well-known foods? For some reason, it says crabs, scrapple, and slippery dumplings. So, what is a slippery dumpling, and are you a fan?
If they don't sell it at Charcoal Pit, then I don't
Let's
know what
go.
it is.
Okay, I'd love to ask a question I think a lot of Delawareans are wondering right now. Does size matter?
Does size matter?
You're the governor of the
Uh,
second smallest state in the country. Does
Right.
size matter?
Right. Small but mighty. Small but mighty. It's the power and the punch. For a small country like ours, 2/3 of the Fortune 500 companies
It's true.
globally are incorporated in Delaware. Last year, 81% of the initial public offerings were incorporated in Delaware. I think there's an advantage to being small. We can get together. We can get things done. I've lived in big cities, big places in New York, in Chicago, in Nairobi, Kenya, in Baghdad. We're a small place. Everybody knows each other. Everybody here is dated, mated, or related. And
Wow.
there are there
That
are
should be your new
benefits to that.
slogan. Dated, mated,
mated,
or
or
related.
related.
All right, we're going to finish up. Our final segment, real quick, is sponsored by Snuff Mill. They're an award-winning farm-to-table steakhouse
That's
and
great.
wine
Snuff
bar.
Mill's sponsoring it. That's
Right
awesome.
here in Wilmington. From
That's good.
caviar, they have oysters, Master Oyster Guild member on site for you. Filet mignon, they have something for everyone. It's the perfect place to celebrate life's biggest achievements. So to end off, we want to celebrate your greatest achievements and Delaware's greatest achievements. So we want to give you the floor. What do you think your 3 greatest achievements are? Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be governor, but just in life. What are the 3 things that you're most proud of?
Number one, it's amazing when you're a school teacher. 11 years ago, I was a 6th and 7th grade math teacher who had incredible opportunities as a Delaware kid growing up. I think Andres has experienced some of that. Got a chance to live in Kenya, got a chance to serve as a diplomat embedded with the army. Like I was in a war in Mosul, came back home. And as a 6th and 7th grade teacher, I just felt like Delaware deserved a lot more than what I saw in the schools. And I had, imagined that I could put myself in a place where I could have a greater say in impacting kids and families' lives. And now I'm the first governor in Delaware history ever who's a public school teacher. I think the most important job of governors around the country is to oversee our education system. That's something I'm really proud of. Now, with that pride comes a tremendous responsibility that I feel every morning that I only have, 3 years and 9 months left to deliver on that promise. If I'm reelected, 7 years and 9 months left to deliver on that promise. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second is the Hope Center, which was a hotel, one of the largest hotels in Delaware, that we transformed into the largest homeless shelter in state history. I'm coming from there actually right now. There's a documentary called The Pathway Home about it online. It won an Emmy Award. And so we're really proud of that. To date, over almost 6,000 people have spent at least one night here. Delaware is a small place. 6,000 people is a lot. It's like a sizable percentage of the population. Almost 700 families, households have gone from living in the Hope Center to stable permanent housing outside the Hope Center. And the third thing, all I can think about is the last time I was at Snuff Mill. I ordered this piece of beef, like theirs. I think it's the best steak I ever. I'm not a big steak eater. I'm trying to eat less, more vegetables, some fish. But man, choosing to buy that, choosing to order that piece of meat, might have been one of the best decisions I ever made.
There's no bigger.
You can't ask for a better.
You can't ask for a better
response than
endorsement than that.
Okay, let's do Delaware's top 3. We can go, 1, 2, or how do we want to order this?
I'll go first.
All
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I think first state is pretty good. I mean, you're the only one that can say that, right?
Yeah. Okay, first date.
I mean, the fact that a state our size elected a president and at the same time had the star of Parks and Rec, one of the most watched TV shows. I mean, who would want to be in any other state?
You know what?
Aubrey Plaza. I mean, Joe Biden is like number 2 in Delaware. Aubrey is the big winner.
People say that Delaware doesn't have famous people. And although that's kind of true, it's not because of people like Aubrey Plaza and Joe Biden.
Aubrey.
And the guy who created the Heimlich. And that's the end of the list. But we have those
The
three.
guy who created the Heimlich? You don't know his
Henry
name?
Heimlich.
Heimlich.
Henry. It's not Heimlich.
We call him Hank.
Hank
here
Heimlich.
locally.
Yeah,
Hank.
he was at the
Delaware
charcoal
Hank.
pit. Someone was choking on.
That's a lie.
No, yeah, it's a lie. but that's cool. But that's always that's the end of the list with the famous people. Sorry. Okay, before we ask the final question, I gotta ask.
Wait, there was 3. I thought we were top 3.
I'm gonna give the
He's
last
gonna
one.
name
Okay.
his.
But before I ask that, you're a bike aficionado.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about Joe Biden, he had quite a moment on a bike. How did you feel about that as
You
a
know,
bike aficionado?
you're talking about when he fell over?
Yeah.
So about a week after, it was 3-4 years ago, about a week after he fell over, I was riding in Wilmington. The true story. I was riding in Wilmington. It was drizzling a little bit, but I didn't care. I slipped and I fell. Like
You
I
fell
fell
off
off
that
my bike. Right?
So Delaware
And I had a nice
politicians
cut
are
on my
just
knee.
falling off
And-
bikes.
And somebody across, when you're a county executive, nobody knows who you are, right? So nobody, whatever, it was fine. I could just like limp home with a bloody knee, right? I was a little embarrassed. And when I did it, somebody across the street says, Meyer,
No way.
you got to run for president now.
No.
And I'm like, that is so funny. And it like took all the pain away, saying, oh, I'm going to be president one day because
Yeah.
I'm a Delawarean who fell off my bike.
Wow. That's awesome.
Listen,
So
I
it runs in the
admire
Delaware
anyone.
culture.
If somebody says they never fell off a bike, they're
Yeah.
not a real bike rider.
I think it's more impressive to fall off your bike than fall off a golf cart. I mean, when you're
Did
playing.
Trump fall off a golf cart?
No, but
Oh.
if he were to fall off a golf
That'd be
cart, I
pretty
think it's
funny.
more impressive that
Yeah.
Joe Biden
Yeah,
was
that's
riding
right.
his bike. He was trying to stay active
Yeah.
than playing golf.
Yeah.
But that's my
I would
opinion.
say the final achievement of Delaware, and feel free to elaborate on this or not, you don't have to, is you leveling Elon Musk on national television. That's if
Elon
you
who?
don't exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Did that joke go over like you thought it
I don't
would?
know if it was as much of a joke as you.
You just didn't know who he was.
People don't. It's actually a relatively serious. Like Delaware corporate franchise
It
is really
is.
important, not just to Delaware, but I think to the global economy, to the business economy. I've lived in a place like Kenya where when there are business disputes, you pull out a knife, you pull out a gun. That's how you resolve them. And an alternative to that is you go to some court system that's some kangaroo court, quite frankly, in America, where there's an elected judge and whoever gave the biggest campaign contribution, that's who wins the case. I think it's really important to our business culture that you have a court that's unbiased. And if you don't get the right answer, you appeal it. And I think because Elon Musk has a case here, because Elon Musk is sort of large in life and the richest person in the world, and he's actually built a company that I have had some admiration for. Tesla, it's incredible. And PayPal, actually, before that. I think that a lot of people look at Delaware corporate franchise now and they associate it with Elon Musk. That's not really accurate. What we need to do in Delaware is make sure we retain that status as a top business core. If you look over the 100+ years that Delaware's been the preeminent place to incorporate a company, there have been actually companies that have come and gone, individual corporate leaders that have loved Delaware. Amazon, Google, Tesla, Meta, 20 years ago, those names meant nothing, right? Maybe Google was around then. But the three of those, 30 years ago, those names meant nothing. If you said General Motors, Chrysler, those were the IBM, those were the big companies, right? And in that interview, I was just focused on how do we do it? And he's asking me about Elon. I have a friend, and maybe he's listening to this, Elon Wineglass from a true story from Delaware.
His other friend Randy.
And so anytime anybody says Elon to me, the first thing I think of is Elon Wineglass. And I'm like, am I really here on CNBC? And they're asking about my buddy Elon Wineglass.
So it wasn't
I was about
a
to say,
joke?
where is Elon Wineglass?
So it was not a joke.
It wasn't necessary. It was Elon who? It was legit. Elon who? And then I was on Musk. I'm like, I don't know what to say to Elon Musk. I want our corporate franchise to be sustained for generations to come.
Wow.
Makes sense.
That's awesome. All right, we'll leave you with this. If you had one message for Delawareans right now, maybe those who are worried about big corporations leaving or just concerned about the state of, honestly, national politics, what would that message be?
I think the message is that in America, you can do anything. That 11 years ago, I was a teacher who felt kind of alone after the experiences I had in Iraq and coming home and saying, this is the education our kids are getting. As long as we come together, as long as we organize together, as long as we have a shared vision for our future, what Donald Trump does or what Elon Musk does or whoever does, Elon Wineglass does, right? There's a future for us here in Delaware, as is true in other communities and states and countries, that if we come together and think about the future that we want, if we really decide as a community to have the best schools, that we don't want the 45th best schools in the country. We want to have the best schools. I don't know if we can get number one, but we can get awful close. If we want to really decide, my wife is an emergency room doctor, right? If we really, healthcare is another, these systems, and I think it's one reason, quite frankly, Donald Trump was elected, because these systems are broken. We live in this incredibly technological time when when I was your age, you had to plug a phone into a wall, not to age myself too much, right? And when my, grandparents were your age, they were using plastic cups and ropes, right? To talk to each other over a distance. We live in an incredible time. They're literally sending rockets to the sky and then landing them back to things that were, we were all cavemen once. It's unimaginable. And so this idea that people are so disheartened or discouraged by what's going on, we need to come together as a community, really decide what we value and deliver on those things.
Thank you so much for being here, Matt. This was incredible.
Hey, thanks a lot. Keep studying. Don't drop out.